Hello house lovers, what a glorious day it is in Melbourne. Finally spring has resprung after the coldest couple of weeks. Anyway, I just want to show you a magnolia that is just around the corner here. Isn't it just stunning? I love magnolias. Anyway, let us get back to the adventure at hand. What is going on inside Bonaccord House? I think it's time to talk floors. And yes, I am still applying the stripper to the wall in the hall, my goodness me. But let's go upstairs to George's room, which of course you know is going to be our dining room. And ta-da! Yesterday, I took up that flooring that was there. Now you might remember it had looked so asbestos-y. I got the asbestos boys to come through and test it. And in fact, it was just cement board underneath the tiles. But it was safe. So I had to take it up and heavily glued on. So here's a little aside, house lovers. Please do not glue anything to fabulous old floorboards, because at some point, someone like me is going to have to get on their hands and knees and chisel it all off again. And what my work on George's floor led me to ponder was the whole nature of our floors. Let's have a quick review of the house floors thus far. So you can see here that generally all the boards across the board are in really good condition. There's only a few spots where we'll have to replace anything, and it's going to be quite easy to get some replacements for those. Now, when we first bought the house, we had a building inspection, and the inspector revealed that the floors were all Baltic pine and in generally good condition. Obviously, the inspector couldn't see everything because it was all covered in carpet. Baltic pine, very common in houses of this era. Remember, this house was built in 1874. And Baltic pine, as the name suggests, comes from the Baltic region and Scandinavia. And in fact, this timber most likely was shipped to Melbourne directly from Norway, and it was used as ballast because Australia didn't have any indigenous softwoods that were used in flooring particularly. So this timber was brought out because it was quite cheap as ballast and used as the building boom in the late 19th century took off in Australia. Curiously, after the First World War, there were import duties imposed upon imported softwoods, so particularly pine, to encourage the local milling industry. From the 20s onwards, most timber flooring in Australian houses was local timber, local hardwood. Death knell for pine. The great thing about Baltic, as you can see, is that it has quite a soft, mellow colour. It's not very yellow, it's quite light, very much like the modern Scandi aesthetic that you see now everywhere. So these boards are not going to have that very yellow, orangey, piney finish. It's going to be a much more mellow colour. Which then brings us to the grand question of what are we going to do? Obviously, I'm going to maintain the floors and preserve them. Not that simple. So on the ground floor of a house such as this, the internal walls and the joists are often supported on stumps. Now, obviously over time, they are going to subside. So one of the first things we have to do is take up the floors on the lower level and re-stump those stumps to make sure that the floor is level and that everything is supported correctly. The other thing that enables us to do is to clear out all the dirt and the muck that's accumulated under the floor on the ground floor and to establish ventilation, because one of the things you need to have in a floor such as that, in a timber floor, is you need ventilation underneath to prevent damp and mold occurring, etc. And I know for a fact that part of the Victorian design of ventilation has been blocked up, so we've got to investigate that. The next thing is then to find replacements for bits that have rotted or have been cut away. These boards are of a certain width. They're much wider than modern cut boards are now, so we do need to find Victorian ones, and they are around in salvage yards. So it's not going to be a problem to find replacement boards. The other thing we'll need to do once we've taken them up and cleaned out underneath, taken out all the old copper piping, all the old electrical cabling so that it's quite clean and fresh and airy under there, is then to spray them with an insecticide. There is a particular borer that lives in this sort of pine. It's not a major issue. You spray it once and then you're done for a great many years. Once the building work is done, we will relay the boards and then we will get someone in to sand them and seal them. And then this is where not the conundrum, but where your choices lie, is what do you do? Now, what we're going to do is seal them with a wood sealer so that, for example, if you drop something on it, it's not going to stain the timber, but we're not then going to polish it. So what I'm going for is, strangely enough, a kind of pared back, natural, Scandi, unpolished, pale floorboard look using our very own Baltic pine. It's quite fascinating that all this timber was shipped all the way around the world, and that these trees that we're standing on were growing somewhere in Scandinavia over 150 years ago. And you'd imagine that the trees are probably nearly 200 years old now, the timber, given that the tree would have had to be mature when it was cut down. It's quite a legacy, and it's one that I want to preserve. And I love soft flooring underfoot. In the modern part of the house, we're going to be doing a concrete pad with underfloor heating, so that's all going to be tickety-boo and fabulous. But here, it is the return of the Baltic board. There we are, house lovers. You will find, if you're in a similar position with an old house with old boards, that a lot of builders are going to say, it's going to be so much cheaper to rip them all up and replace them with new ones. Yes, it might be cheaper and it might be easier, but is it the right thing to do? And you know what? I'm not sure that it is cheaper. I think it's just easier. So you might have to fight a bit of a pitched battle on that front if you want to preserve your boards. And you might have to do all the legwork yourself, which means pulling out all the pins, pulling out all the staples, countersinking anything that's poking up so that the boards are in really good condition for someone then to come in and sand them. You can do that yourself as well. You can actually hire the sanders, which are like a ride-on lawnmower, and you, you ride along and sand your floorboards. It's really dusty though, and I would definitely get someone else to come in and do that. Wherever you are, you will find that there are going to be lots of specialist floor repairers, floor restorers, people who understand an old surface and what you want to do. So again, shop around and find someone who wants to work with you on saving as many of the boards as you can and figuring out a plan for replacing those that you can't. There we are, house lovers. Once again, thanks for watching. I hope wherever you are, things are okay. Things are still a bit hairy in Melbourne. We're still at stage 4. But you know, here am I, stripping walls. I have something to live for. Thank you again for watching. Thank you for hitting like, and thank you for subscribing if you're interested. Feel free to ask any questions. I am not an expert, but I have learned a lot from my own experience here, so I'm very happy to share that. In the meantime, take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.